I tried to bring my infidelity to an end quietly, but my loving husband walked in on my final meeting with the person I was cheating with. I call myself selfish every night when I sit in a quiet house without my children. My ex-husband has every reason to hate me. My immediate family is divided, and I've never stopped despising myself for what I did. My selfish act happened in 2015 when I was 39 years old, and I admit I took my ex-husband for granted. He would call me beautiful every day, sought intimacy with me, cared for me, and treated me as his equal, not like a queen or a princess. We were married for 20 years, having been high school sweethearts and each other's first love. My family adored him, and he supported my brother through tough times. He was the person everyone went to for help, a truly good man. Over the years, we had 4 children, 2 strong boys aged 18 and 16, and twin girls aged 13. I gained weight and became self-conscious, but he constantly reassured me of my beauty. Our arguments were rare, and when they did occur, they were mostly about intimacy, as I often wasn't in the mood. When I turned 39, a year of going to the gym and doing yoga and Pilates transformed me. I went from 180 pounds to 135, a dramatic change for someone who had been chubby. My ex-husband also worked on himself, dropping from 260 to 225 pounds, but he didn't join me at the gym as often. Despite his increased attention and affection, I wasn't mentally or emotionally present. We tried dinners, dancing, and walks, and he helped around the house. He continued to look at me with desire, even after 20 years of marriage. Many women would have dreamed of that, but I couldn't bring myself to reciprocate. I attributed it to early menopause, as we were only intimate 2 or 3 times a month. He wanted more, but I refused couples counseling. Then, my selfishness fully emerged. A new manager at work, who was slightly younger and handsome, began showing interest in me shortly after my birthday. Initially, I ignored him, but casual conversations developed into flirting. I showed him my wedding ring, but after 2 months of his persistent attention, I found myself flirting back. I even shared details about my personal life with him. I started thinking about him more and more. Looking back, I understand it was an emotional affair, but at the time it felt thrilling and addictive. My husband began to sense something was wrong. We had a heated argument that started when he tried to kiss me. I made a face that he interpreted as disgust. I told myself it wasn't directed at him, but the truth was, I was thinking about the other man. A week later, I arranged to meet the manager at a cafe, intending to end things. Before I could speak, he kissed me, and I found myself unable to resist. That marked the start of a 6-month affair. With him, I was enthusiastic and always in the mood, doing things my husband had long wanted but that I had always refused. Intimacy with my husband continued during this time but became less frequent. I started nitpicking small habits of his and even belittling him. I am deeply ashamed of how I treated him. I only realized the extent of my actions when my brother visited and shared that my husband had confided in him about his depression and thoughts of separation. My husband felt unloved and was falling out of love with me. That snapped me out of my destructive behavior. I immediately ended the affair, quit my job, and resolved to be a better wife and make my husband feel loved again. One day, my affair partner came to my house with a box of my belongings from the office. He asked to talk, wanting to know why I ended things. I explained that I needed to repair my marriage. He asked for one final encounter, and against all reason, I agreed. We ended up in the guest room, and I have no idea how much time passed before my husband entered the room. There was a loud bang, a gunshot, and my husband stood there, his face contorted with pain, bloodshot eyes filled with tears, and his lips trembling. My affair partner had flinched violently, and there was now a hole in the wall. I tried to say something, but my husband's overwhelming pain left me speechless. My affair partner attempted to leave, but my husband glared at him. My affair partner warned him to back off, which enraged my husband, and he attacked him. I screamed and cried, begging my husband to stop. Out of desperation, I jumped on his back, only to be thrown to the floor. Everything became blurry for a while, and sounds were muffled. When I regained my senses, I saw my ex-husband kneeling beside my affair partner, who was lying on his side while speaking into the phone. I could do nothing but stare at my partner's swollen face and the blood and teeth scattered on the floor near him. A loud knock came at the door, and I watched my ex slowly put the phone on speaker, place it on the floor, drop to his knees, and interlock his hands behind his head. The police entered, handcuffed him, and paramedics arrived shortly after. I learned later that he had called special services on himself. At the hospital, everything went downhill. My father didn't say a word, he just gave me a look of profound disappointment. My brother shouted at me, devastated, asking how I could do this to my ex-husband. My mother tried to comfort me, which only led to my father yelling at her. My ex-husband's family was enraged. His sisters made threats, and his parents looked like they wanted me gone for good. When I approached my children, they refused to talk to me. My sons wouldn't even meet my eyes. My affair partner was severely injured, requiring reconstructive surgery to repair the extensive damage to his face. At the hospital, a woman stormed into my room and attacked me. My brother intervened, pulling her off. I soon discovered she was my affair partner's wife. He had never told me he was married, nor had he worn a ring, which made me feel even worse. Leading up to the trial, my sons stayed with their grandparents on my ex-husband's side, and my daughters wouldn't speak to me. My ex also wanted nothing to do with me. I tried visiting him at the county facility, but I was denied entry. My brother ensured my ex-husband was transferred to the correctional center where he worked to keep a close eye on him. When I asked my brother to pass along a message to my ex, he told me to go to hell. The trial was the first time I had seen my ex-husband in 3 months. His anger when he looked at me was more painful than anything else I'd ever experienced. Even in our worst arguments, he had always looked at me with love. At the trial, his gaze was filled with hate. It broke me, and I had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom. During the proceedings, I was forced to recount every detail of my affair publicly. When I revealed its duration, my ex-husband looked devastated, and my father walked out of the courtroom. During my ex-husband's testimony, I learned that he had come home to surprise me with lunch and a weekend getaway to the Catskills. He had planned a romantic trip for 2, but walked in on me and my affair partner instead. He testified that when the other man told him to back off, he lost control and attacked him, only stopping when he threw me off him. Afterward, he called special services himself. In court, they played the recording of his 911 call, and hearing his broken sobs as he followed the operator's instructions was heart-wrenching. My affair partner couldn't testify due to heavy medication, so images of his injuries were presented instead. Seeing them made me sick with guilt. My ex-husband had shattered his eye socket, cheekbones, and jaw, with fragments of bone too small to repair. My ex-husband was convicted of a 3rd-degree felony and sentenced to 7 years. His sentencing led to protests from my sons and anguished cries from his family that still haunt me. The first 3 months after the trial were unbearable. My affair partner's wife sued me for alienation of affection. My ex-husband filed for divorce. My oldest son moved out. My second son became withdrawn, and my twin daughters rebelled. My former sisters-in-law confronted me publicly, and my ex-mother-in-law spat in my face when I tried to apologize. My father and brother stopped speaking to me entirely. I had to find a new job because we lost our income, and I nearly depleted my savings. My reputation in my field was ruined, so I ended up working in retail and as a seasonal tax preparer. I almost lost the house. Letters I sent to my ex-husband were returned unopened, and my attempts to visit him were denied. Crying in the shower became part of my daily routine. My parents' marriage nearly fell apart because my mother defended me, while my father and brother refused to forgive me. Even my lifelong friends were divided over what I had done. At my lowest, I considered leaving everything behind, overwhelmed by guilt. Therapy eventually helped, though my therapist was blunt. She told me I had taken my ex-husband for granted, treating him as a friend with benefits rather than a husband. She was right. A year passed in silence from my children. When I cooked dinner, they took their plates to their rooms without speaking to me. I broke down many times, begging them to talk to me, but they remained silent. When my brother got married, I wasn't invited, though my kids attended. I kept trying to visit my ex-husband, hoping he'd add me to his visitor list, but every attempt failed, and my letters kept being returned, deepening my depression. One day my brother arrived unexpectedly. He berated me, revealing that my ex-husband had been stabbed in the stomach during an assault in prison. In retaliation, my ex had severely injured his attacker, breaking the man's spine. My brother blamed me, shouting, "You did this," before leaving. I cried for days because he was right. I had caused all of this. Attempts to visit my ex in the infirmary were also denied. For the next 4 years, I continued to write letters and tried to visit, but he refused every contact. Thankfully, our children maintained a close relationship with their father, visiting him often. I learned from them that my brother had arranged for my ex-husband to be placed in protective custody after the attack. Over the years, my oldest son followed in his father's footsteps, attending the same college and majoring in the same field. He never called me, only spoke to his siblings, and never came home for holidays, only visiting his grandparents. My second son followed a similar path, attending the same college and refusing to contact me. My twins were the hardest on me, though they visited their father weekly, which seemed to improve their mood. When they acted out, my brother stepped in to discipline them. My brother and I still barely spoke, and I wasn't welcome when his wife gave birth to their first child. My mother kept me updated on family events, but my father continued to ignore me entirely. Earlier this year, in May, my children came home unexpectedly. I didn't care why, I was just happy to have them back. For 4 months, I tried everything to show my regret and earn their forgiveness. Although they mostly ignored me at first, they eventually started talking to me again. Those conversations brought me immense joy, and I cherished learning about their lives. My oldest even shared that he had been dating someone for over a year. My second-born child was part of his college's track team, and even my daughters had started speaking to me again. Witnessing their smiles, hearing their laughter, and sharing meals as a family brought back the joy I had missed for so long. However, these moments deepened my self-loathing for what I had done to them. By late August, I felt excited about my twins starting their senior year of high school, which coincided with their 18th birthday. I eagerly brought up plans for their birthday celebration, but they asked if we could move it to a different day. This request confused me because I thought we were beginning to mend our relationship. When I asked why, one of them bluntly said, "Because Dad is throwing us a party and I don't want you near him." Their words stunned me. I asked when their father had been released, and they revealed he had been out since late April for good behavior. Hearing this crushed me. It explained why they had been around more often, not because we were healing, but because their father was back in their lives. He made them happy again. When I asked where he was staying, they told me he was living with my brother, desperate to speak with him. I called, but he refused to talk. Determined, I went to see him, bringing all the letters I had written over the years that were returned to me unopened. Through the narrow crack of the door, I caught a glimpse of him and called his name. My brother told me to leave, but before I could, I handed over the letters and started walking away. Then I heard his voice. I turned and saw him walking toward me. Tears filled my eyes as I ran to hug him, but he handed the letters back, coldly saying, "You forgot this." My heart broke as I stood there crying, watching him walk away. I begged and pleaded for him to talk to me, but he ignored me, heading back inside. My children stood by the door, staring at me with blank expressions. At that moment, I realized they weren't with me out of love. They were merely tolerating me. Still, I hold on to hope. I want to tell him how selfish I was, how much I miss him, and how sorry I am for destroying what we once had. I want him to forgive me, to talk to me, to look at me with the same love he used to. I long to have our family together again, even though I know I don't deserve it. Deep down, I understand that even if, by some miracle, we became a family again, things could never truly be the same. My selfishness took everything from us, and I wish I could undo it all. Second story. This is my response to my mother's post. I go to great lengths to keep my family's history hidden from my college friends. None of them know that my father spent time in prison, and I don't plan on telling them. Walking around campus one day, I overheard people discussing and sharing a certain post. It triggered a flood of emotions I'd been trying to suppress. After investigating further, I gathered enough information to confirm that the post was about my family, which enraged me. I confronted my mother about it, but her emotional reaction escalated into an argument. A similar confrontation happened when I visited my dad and told him about it. Even so, I believe my father is a good man. During our argument, he scolded me, not for bringing it up, but for disrespecting my mother. He told me that even if I didn't love her, I should still respect her. It's difficult to respect someone like her, but I try. My dad often talks about the struggles he faced growing up and how fortunate we are to have grown up in a better environment. He told us how, in the South Bronx, pursuing academic success could make you a target. At just 15 years old, his father passed away from cancer, leaving him to take on the role of caretaker for his two younger sisters. With no life insurance, he worked hard to help with rent and groceries while continuing his education. He always said it was a blessing that his mother remarried a good man and that they moved to upstate New York for a better life. According to my uncle, in the 90s, my dad's distinctive style, including baggy clothes and a Puerto Rican flag shirt, initially led to teasing from his peers. Surprisingly, instead of backing down, he defended himself, earning their respect. He even befriended one of them after helping him through a tough time. That same friend introduced my dad to my mom, and they attended the same college. By the end of their freshman year, they were married. Growing up, my parents were affectionate. They always held hands and kissed, even during my senior year when things started falling apart. My dad adored my mom, but never put her on a pedestal. He told me that treating a woman as superior would make her lose respect for you. His philosophy, treating your wife as an equal, a best friend, and a confidant, was a lesson passed down from both his father and stepfather. At 5'6" and 260 pounds, my dad was a big man, but he was always active, playful, and kind. He set an example of what kind of man girls should look for. He stood by my uncle through difficult times, helping him become a better person when others had given up on him. Before my mom's affair, she loved my dad, and he was her biggest supporter. Despite their seemingly perfect marriage, she destroyed it. I remember the months when she began belittling him. My dad, though hurt, held back, always hoping they could fix things. Despite his career as a successful financial advisor, he could shift to a more assertive demeanor when necessary. My grandmother often said he was like his father, kind and respectful, but capable of defending himself when needed. My dad did everything to salvage their marriage, bringing her flowers, taking her to dinner, dancing. But she was detached, caught up in her own world. We all saw how her behavior affected him and the family. Still, my dad reassured us that everything would be okay, blaming her stress from work. When she quit her job, I genuinely thought the problem was solved. Then, my dad was arrested. Mom, do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Everyone at school was talking about it. Dad went to prison because of your infidelity. I couldn't even stand to look at you. I stayed with Grandma because seeing you disgusted me. When I visited Dad in jail, he wouldn't look at me. He said he was ashamed, that he had failed as a husband and a man. I told him he hadn't failed us, but he insisted he had. He believed a real man would have thought about the consequences before reacting the way he did. As a husband, he felt like a failure because his wife betrayed him. When you had the nerve to ask for forgiveness, I wanted, for the first time in my life, to physically hurt you. We were all hurting, and you still asked for forgiveness. Sitting through that trial and listening to the special services call was the hardest 25 minutes of my life. 25 minutes of hearing my father, who would have done anything for you, crying and begging the operator for guidance. He kept repeating that the love of his life had betrayed him and that it hurt all of us more than anything else. I know you tried to testify as a character witness for Dad and we all begged you not to, but you did it anyway. Why did you feel the need to show us that you still cared for him to tell the court he was a good man? In my view, your cross-examination, where you revealed how long your affair lasted, was the reason we lost him. If we had been able to afford a decent lawyer instead of relying on a court-appointed one, maybe he wouldn't have gone to prison. I developed anger issues because of what happened. My brother started secretly drinking, and one of the twins became suicidal, but you didn't notice. You were too focused on trying to fix things with Dad, leaving me to handle everything and support my siblings. I hated you for it, and honestly, part of me still does. When I started college, I wanted nothing to do with you. Like Dad, I had to step into a parental role for my siblings. I was juggling a full-time job and school while sending you money to help with the bills. Mom, I understand it was hard for you, and I know you were struggling with depression, but you weren't alone. Grandma helped with expenses, though she defended you out of loyalty to the family, not because she believed in you. At least, that's what the twins think. When Dad was stabbed, I almost had a breakdown. I had just visited him that day, joking with him about his prison body plan. I was halfway back to school when I got the call. I was so shocked that I nearly crashed the car. It was a difficult time for all of us. I never told anyone this, but I sat outside the apartment of the person you were involved with, thinking of confronting him. When I saw him walking with a cane, I remembered what Dad had taught me and drove away instead. As the years went by, things only got worse. Grandma passed away, then Grandpa, and Dad couldn't even attend their funerals. Did you know his sisters got married in the waiting area of the prison just so he could give them away? The damage you caused is immeasurable. It didn't help that you kept pushing us to forgive you, to give you another chance, without letting us process everything or heal. You never gave us the space we needed. All I saw was someone desperate to make themselves feel better. It didn't seem like you cared about how we felt. You started trying in later years, but you failed when it mattered most. When Dad was released, he told us to start speaking to you again because you were still our mother and deserved that respect. So we did, and for a while, it made you happy. I remembered what it felt like to not hate you. Dad had trouble finding work at first, but one of his old clients eventually hired him. I didn't expect the twins to drop the news on you about his release. Dad never wanted you to know. When you showed up, it upset him so much that he threw up after speaking to you. He said the mere sight of you made him sick. For over 3 years now, he has been seeing someone else regularly, and they've been spending time together since his release. So please, stop holding on to the fantasy of reconciling with him. If you want to work on your relationship with us, your children, then call me. That post you made last week about our worst moments was selfish. Dad only sees you as the mother of his children now, nothing more.